We previously learned that beat is the regular, predictable, and boring pulse. Rhythm is the word used to describe the timing of the notes we actually hear in comparison to the steady beat. Here we have a graphical representation of the meter, in which time moves from left to right. We'll start in a simple duple meter. We already know how to count the beats. 1, 2, 1, 2. And because it's simple meter, we know that we can divide each beat into two equal parts. We'll call the second half of each beat and we'll label it with a plus sign. Now our meter sounds like this: 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. We can further subdivide each half beat into two more parts, so each beat now comprises 4 equal parts. Listen to me count the meter, and notice that while I'm identifying more parts, it's still steady and predictable. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Measuring time with beats is exactly the same as measuring distance with inches. Each big unit gets a number, which can then be broken down further to locate items that might not land right on a number. In this set of notes and rests, the length of each colored rectangle represents the duration of the note. 16th notes are half as wide as eighth notes. Eighth notes are half as wide as quarter notes, and quarter notes are half as wide as half notes. In the same way with the rests, a 16th rest lasts half as long as an eighth rest, which lasts half as long as a quarter rest, which in turn is half the length of a half rest. When I choose a bottom number for my time signature, I associate the two, and I turn these abstract beats into concrete note values. I'm choosing a 2-4 time signature, so I know that each beat lasts exactly a quarter note. Any of these note values can be played at any time, and it is the job of rhythm to identify when that happens in comparison to the meter. So if I put some notes up here, we can see that I have a note beginning at the beginning of the first beat, at the beginning of the second beat, and also a note that begins on the second half of the second beat, which we will call the and of 2. To discover how this rhythm sounds, first I establish the meter. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. While I'm saying that, I can clap on the syllable which begins each requested note. So 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Or I can do the whole thing with just the numbers. First I establish the meter. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. If I drop the whispered syllables and I say only the syllables indicated by the notes, I'm left with just the rhythm. 1, 2, and. Let's do another. In this example, I've added a second measure. Measures are always divided by a vertical line called a bar line. The bar line does not take any time at all. The meter continues from one measure to the next without a break. In this example, we'll have eighth notes filling the first beat. We'll put an eighth rest on the second beat. And then we'll have a note on the second half of the second beat, and yet another note on the last fourth of the second beat. We'll fill the first beat of the second measure with a quarter note, and the second beat with eighth notes. So our syllables for these notes are going to be one, and, one, two, and. The rest takes up space, but makes no noise. Listen to me count this rhythm. 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. Or 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a. If I just say the syllables indicated by the notes, I'm left with 1 and a 1, 2 and. Every measure must be completely full. You can't leave spaces or gaps, and you can't move on to the next measure before the first measure is complete. I always like to say gravity flows to the left, so the notes fall to the next available place in the meter. So if I have an eighth note here, I cannot put my quarter note here without first filling in the space somehow with a rest if necessary. The duration of all the notes must add up to the entire bar. It would not be appropriate, for instance, to leave this bar like that because there's nothing here to fill this space and tell us what to do with that time. Now, as long as we fill up the bar, we can put the notes anywhere we want. For instance, let's go back to this rhythm that we had before. 1 and 2 and. But so long as I fill up the bar, I could simply swap those two notes. Even though this is a quarter note, and it does take up one full beat, it doesn't have to start on the beat. You can see that the syllable we will identify it with is the and. So again, if our meter is 1 and 2 and 1E and a 2E and a, we will count this as 1 and 1E and a 2E and a. If we have multiple flagged notes right next to each other, oftentimes we will unfurl these flags and connect them together in what we call a beam. This makes it easier to read the notes in a group. Generally, we only beam together notes within a beat so we can see the beat groupings. At first glance, it is obvious that there are two beats in this bar, and it's obvious where the second beat begins because it starts a new group of beamed notes.